Today, we're going to talk about campaign strategy and what you need to know going in so you don't spend the next 5 years planning something you're never going to get to use, especially if you're running under a political banner. Okay. So I have a lot of candidates that have been planning their first run for a really long time. They've picked their slogan, they know their colors, what they're going to go hard on, what their constituents want to hear, and they have all these speeches in their head and the things they're going to champion and whatever. And then they come into party politics and they're all excited and they can't wait to bring all those ideas to headquarters, and nobody even gives them a minute to share their ideas. I'm going to tell you again, nobody cares about your ideas. And whatever you think you're going to run on, whatever color, slogan, whatever, I mean, you might be able to use it, whatever, but it's not, you're just basically wasting your time. Because there's technology that party headquarters uses that you are not privy to that will give you actual information that will be really helpful in winning, especially winning overall. Because remember, it's not just about your riding. And sometimes what is good for your riding is not good for the overall election. So every decision is being put through the filter of what is good for the overall election, not just you as a candidate or your riding, and you need to be prepared for that. So having said that about the technology and the stuff that you don't know, headquarters is going to put together a platform, and they're going to put together talking points, and they're also going to put together slogans. And these are slogans that have been tested with the population, how they resonate, how they make people feel. And there's going to be certain verbiage they're going to want you to use as often as possible. They're going to want you to insert it in different speeches. They're going to want you to insert these keywords. Right? So all your messaging is going to be, has to be around the keywords the party headquarters gives you. So if you're talking your messaging and it's not exactly on point of, overarching messaging, then you're going to have a problem with headquarters because they're watching everything you do. So if headquarters is saying this election is about economy, let's say, and so we're going to talk about the economy as much as possible, and then you sit there and talk about crime the whole time because maybe crime is a problem in your, constituency, you're going to have a problem with headquarters because they know that election's not going to be won on crime. It's going to be won on economy, and that's what they want you to talk about. So all this time that you're spending right now thinking, I'm going to say this and I'm going to be the champion of that and whatever, is big waste of time. Because the only thing you need to know is what HQ wants you to say. So what happens is they start the campaign and you'll usually have this big onboarding meeting with all the campaign managers and all the different ridings and all the candidates to introduce each other, yada, yada. And the party leader will come on and say, this is what this election's going to be about. They'll put the campaign manager, the big guy in charge of the provincial or federal election for that party, and he's going to say, this is what our polling tells us, this is what whatever tells us, and this is the messaging you're going to use, and this is where we're going to go, and we're going to use this color blue, and yada, yada. Your signs have to be this color blue. This is the picture we want you to use on everything. And, they get very micromanagey with you, right? In terms of what you're allowed to say, do, talk about, and everything else. And that is because anytime you go off message, and God forbid you say something that ends up in the news that for a bad reason, you cost the campaign $1 million a day. And we lose about 3 days of overall messaging because now the party leader or HQ has to spend the time they were going to be spending on a certain thing is now redirected to helping you clean up the mess, right? And so you never want to be that guy. So, you've got to be ready to be fluid and change your messaging and your direction as quickly as possible. And you have to be ready to be fluid. And on that note is, the political climate of things is very difficult, especially when you're in a party that has a huge chasm between different cohorts, right? So in the Conservative Party, for example, you get the far right, and then you get the more centrist fiscal conservatives that are socially progressive, and they're constantly butting heads. So it's really hard to get messaging that makes both happy. So you've got to learn how to skirt that line, and you have to learn how to judge the momentum of a country. So, for example, when it comes to guns, is a perfect example because we've got 3 million gun owners in the country. That's a lot of people you don't want to piss off. But then again, there's, 35, 38 million Canadians. So, am I worried about 3 million when up against 35, 38 million? The same happened with vaccine mandates. So when the vaccine conversation came up during COVID, the vaccine mandates really, it was an issue because there were many conservatives, many conservatives that were afraid of the vaccine and didn't want to take it. Certainly didn't want a mandate because, conservatives tend to the libertarian way of thinking. Many of them do. But we knew that 80% of society, or 80% of Canadians, were getting vaccinated and were pro-vaccine. So the conservatives couldn't be seen as anti-vaccine when 80% of the population was eager to get them. So that put us in a little bit, so we thought, well, let's go with the 80% because 80%, right? Those are your numbers. Let's go with the 80%. So the conservatives did. Well, the PPC used that, grabbed the cohorts that were anti-mandate and got them all to move, to PPC. And that lost us the election. In the one riding I worked on, our riding was in the lead up until 2 weeks before the election, and we were well in the lead. And then all of a sudden, vaccine mandate came down. We decided to go with the 80%, the majority, and be pro-vaccine, only to we lost by 5,000 votes. We lost by 600 votes. I lied to you. We lost by 600 votes, but the PPC in that riding scored 5,000 votes. And a lot of those votes were coming from hardcore Christian pastors that were saying if you got vaccinated, you were getting the mark of the beast. So all those churches went PPC. And when they did, like I said, 5,000 of them went to the PPCs, and we lost by 600 votes. Had that not have happened, we would have won that election. And we thought we were being smart by going with the majority, which federally may be sure that was a good call to make because the conservatives, we didn't lose the popular vote, right? We just lost because of the way the votes are divided, our electoral system. Really, we would have won that election. So, but my riding would have lost it anyway, right? Because of that whole PPC vaccine thing. And we were in a riding where there were a lot of people that were anti-vaccine. So by doing what was good for the party, we ended up hurting our own local, campaign. So remember, there's going to be many times where your localized campaign and what is good for the party overall are not on the same page. And the expectation is that you're going to jump on the grenade, so to speak, and be willing to lose your seat in order for the party to fare well overall. And again, hoping that loyalty will eventually pay off in other ways, even if it's not as an elected official. So it's really difficult to be able to sense where the party's going, where the population's going on a certain thing, and where you position will help you. Because even if you position yourself to, do what the majority of Canadians want in your specific riding, that may not work. And then you may have to pay the price for that. So I just want you to be aware. So when it comes to political climate, and, it's really good to be very aware of the situations that are happening for sure. But understand that there's so many nuances that can become very confusing when you're in it. And you have to learn how to walk the line between the different factions within even your own party. Even on the left, there's different factions. You get more centrist liberals, for example, that are very socially conservative, but not to the extreme that the far left has become. The whole woke thing that is attributed to the left, that's starting to turn off. So let me give you a really weird thing, how things shift over decades. Maybe about 20 or so years ago, no, it was just Harper, the end of Harper's reign, okay? The Liberals started pushing narratives that called conservatives racist. because at the time, conservatives were very concerned with immigration mandates that were being pushed down from the United Nations, and they were pushing back, saying, we don't mind immigration, but we want smart immigration, and we want to be sure that the people we're bringing in will, adhere to Canadian values. And the conservatives got painted as racists for talking like that, especially by the youth of the conservative movement, which all kind of defected and started to go left. And Trudeau comes in, he's this young progressive type guy, and he's going to let in the whole planet, and everybody loves him for it or whatever. So there was this big momentum. And it got to the point that conservatives were so publicly shamed and vilified, being called racist, that conservatives were embarrassed to be public about their conservatism. And we were running campaigns where even the people that would always put a sign on their lawn were suddenly embarrassed to put a sign on their lawn because they were afraid that if they put a conservative sign, their neighbors would think they were racist. So this was like a big thing that happened for a while. And going liberal was considered counterculture. So if you voted liberal at the time, that was the cool thing to do because they were going to legalize cannabis. They were going to bring in all this immigration. They were so progressive, all the LGBTQ rights and everything else that the conservatives were famous for not being supportive of. All of a sudden, the liberals were counterculture, and it was very cool for young people that traditionally always go left anyways. Now we're being pushed super left. Now, a few years have passed by. We've had 8 years of a Trudeau government, and all this super left, right, has started to actually shape our society. So we had, a lot of problems happen with the great stuff that Trudeau was doing. And now the woke culture's gone extreme, cancel culture's gone extreme, and what used to be liberalism has become fascism. And now it has become cool to vote for conservative. So a lot of youth that traditionally will always go left now in Canada are actually moving to the right because they don't want to be associated with cancel culture or with wokeism. They don't want to be the snowflake fragile generation, right? So what used to be, again, cool and counterculture is now the opposite. Counterculture is going in the opposite direction, where now we've got some youth that are saying, I am not a fragile snowflake. I don't get offended by everything. I am not an extreme woke person. I still believe that women and men exist, even though there's a huge spectrum, and I respect everybody on the spectrum. I'm not going to say there's no such thing as men and women. I'm sorry, I'm a woman. Don't erase me. You know what I mean? So now going conservative has become counterculture. I never in my life did I think I'd see that happen, and here we are. So it's really important to look at things happening in society, not just from the lens of what's happening in the moment, which is what we tend to do in politics, is we're always present moment or not looking past the 4-year mark. Most politicians are never looking beyond their own next election, which is why nothing ever gets done, right? But you've got to start looking at things from a longer perspective so that you can start to capitalize on the social shifts that happen. So, for example, now as a conservative, it used to be that we didn't chase the youth very much because the youth always traditionally go left. So it's kind of a waste of time, right? You want to fish where there's fish, okay? But now that conservatives are becoming the cool kids in the room, because nobody wants to be an unhinged woke person anymore. So now conservatism is being cool. Now is the time for conservatives to start capturing engagement from the youth cohort vote, which never in history were conservatives, able to really capitalize on the youth culture, because usually, they're not the cool kids. Conservatives are fiscally responsible. Who wants to talk about that boredom, right? Well, now kids do, because kids are saying, okay, we voted in liberals. We've had them for 8 years, and inflation is through the roof. Our democracy's been, co-opted by foreign influence, and all these other things are happening. And maybe the liberals weren't as cool as we thought they were. You know what I mean? So I think now the cool thing is being conservative, and a lot of kids are feeling that way. So it's really important to look at social trends and how they impact your voters, and how sometimes it's time to shift. Because there's one thing, if I will notice, for example, with the old hat politicians or political strategists, because traditionally we could never count on the youth vote, they never chased them. And even though now you can, they're still not chasing them, because they're still using the playbook that worked for them 25 years ago, not realizing that culture has changed, society has changed, everything is evolving, and you need to evolve your strategy playbook with society so that you can capture the opportunities that other people aren't capturing, right? So it's really important to watch the social trends and to be very careful with the narrative you use, because although a certain terminology might be okay to use today, right, and it's really cool today, there might be pushback from it tomorrow. So when cancel culture and wokeism and everything first started to rear its head, most people weren't supportive of it because on the surface it seemed virtuous. When we saw what that turned into and what it did to our society, all of a sudden it's not so cool anymore, because the ripple effect of that attitude had a detrimental impact on our society. And therefore, now things are stagnating as a result. So you want to leave room for the pushback and understand that you don't want to jump on every bandwagon, because you never know what that might turn into later. So be very, very careful. That's your advice for the day.